So what I was saying on today's live stream is that the world order, old and new, is the unifying worldview. Therefore, it is the one world religion. And they've just updated from Mystery Babylon to Mystery Babylon dressed up like space utopianism. But ultimately, they have sold the free people on Gulag life. The Gulag, of course, is now this high tech plantation on Mars. But it's worked. They won the culture war against the property owners. And so the final stage, I think, was always this: before we can start migrating and taking the former property owners to their paradises on a volunteer basis first, we're going to have to disabuse them of the idea that they're going to need guns anymore. Why will you need guns on Mars? Nobody's going to have guns. Mars will be a gun free zone. Outer space is a gun free zone. It's a meat free zone as well. It's a brain free zone. But no, they get you up there or out there, over there to your Martian plantation, and you would have no idea, since you wouldn't have any control over what's outside of it. You'd have no idea if you were in a totally contrived fake space base, underground or whatever. It'd just be like existing in a plantation where you're kept in a disempowered state by enforced illiteracy, among other things. So we are visually illiterate. Joe Rogan admits this whenever he looks at a video and says, "Is that a real rocket? Is that a real car? I can't tell." He can't tell. He can't read it. His eyes do not give him an accurate estimate of what he's seeing in front of him. He's like, well, it could be real, could be fake, I don't know. Well, it's because, Joe, your brains have been scrambled. And this is, again, this is what I'm looking at here is we've been hit with a counter reformation. So even though the masses of people got the printing press and learned how to read, and it wasn't only confined to the elite and the rich and the priest class, while people were getting up on literature, the priest class was figuring out how to bamboozle us visually, and they've succeeded. And meanwhile, they've destroyed people philosophically. So now people respond as a superorganism. Because if the individual deviates from the mob, well, now that person is a dissident. Now that person is an apostate or a heretic or a conspiracy theorist. And of course, the flat earther represents the person who has rejected all the orthodoxy. In many ways, the flat earther is like the Satanist of the globe paradigm. Like the Satanist is like the one who has the arguments to lead people away from the church. He's a devil's advocate. He's like, you know what, the devil's our best friend, or whatever. Well, the flat earther is really pretty much the devil in this new paradigm, because he's saying, well, none of this can be trusted. Maybe the auto hoaxer even more so, but the auto hoaxer, or the person who has separated the world stage from reality, they haven't even been clearly defined by the media, and I think it's on purpose. They would like it to be able to lump every non-conforming, non-believing thinker into the category of conspiracy theorist or flat earther. They've already done this. Notice this. If you're on the right and you don't believe in climate change, you're a flat earther. That's your default. I tell Timmy this all the time. I'm like, hey man, you may think that you're better than us because, you're still on the ball, but according to the liberals, you're a flat earther like us because you don't believe in climate change. But notice how any conspiracy on the right lumps you in with the flat earthers, which is like the ultimate term of derision. But then on the left, none of what they believe are considered to be conspiracy theories. So if you believe in, climate change, for example, or you believe in these racist hate groups waiting to lynch people, or these bowl cuts with frowny faces waiting to shoot up schools, if you believe in these things, well, these are all conspiracy theories. We've proven this. These are false stories that have been handed out to the public, disseminated intentionally. So it's like, wait, when we talk about what is a conspiracy theory versus what we're doing, it's like, it's pretty interesting how they've actually subverted everything. So now the mainstream, actually, the mainstream media is all about believing in their explanations, their conspiracy theories. And then the people who try to come up with their own explanations, we're the ones who are considered to be, the heretics or whatever they want to call us. But it's just fascinating here how it's almost analogous to the previous Reformation, where the whole thing was Martin Luther and company made the argument that people ought to be able to read the scripture for themselves and decide what it means. That man doesn't need a priest to mediate between him and God, because that's what the church had done. They had become the mediators between the individual and the Creator. So it's kind of fascinating how now this is a striking parallel. They don't want you to understand reality without their mediator. And the media is their priesthood. And it's the same term. We're talking about reality mediation, where your perceptions go through a certain filter to make sure you're conforming. And if you don't conform, they outgroup you and use peer pressure and everything they can to get you to conform. And so what I've been saying for a while here is that the media isn't there documenting reality. Their job isn't to inform you, it's to conform you. Like, you really wouldn't go to church to figure out what's going on in the world. That's just not where you get, this. People make the separation. They think the media is where you do go. Like, they're actually reporting on news and they're telling us what's happening. And like, well, no, that is a high-tech version of what the old school churches do. Mediating the sheeple for the benefit of the oligarchs who own this place. That's why it's important to see through guardrails. So anyone saying that the moon landing is a hoax is a guardrailer, if that's as far as they go. Oh, they faked the moon landing so they could trick the Russians. Okay, I see what you're doing. Because, like, what does a guardrail do? Again, it bounces you off, so you go back to the mainstream. Like, oh, look, this guy slipped. He doesn't believe the moon landing's real. Boom. He knows it's fake, but we had to fake it to trick the Russians. And now he's back on the mainstream, voting for Trump because, it's America versus Russia, America versus China. They still believe in the metascript of the world stage and all of their stories. If the person were to find out that not only was the moon landing fake, but the metascript was fake, I mean, the whole story was fake, from the first man in space to the moon to the space station and everything else. No probes, no satellites. If they found out that the whole outer space production was fake, then there's no way they would go back to the mainstream. They would say, what's the point? It's all rigged. It's all phony. It needs to be totally deconstructed. And so that's what they don't want. So I'm telling people, go over the guardrails. It's all fake. And then you get these professional moon landing debunkers. And I got great literature on the topic. I have a book here called I Suppose We Didn't Go to the Moon Either. And this is by Jim Fetzer. Now, it's a great book. He deconstructs the moon landing 100%. But at the end of the book, you're left with, well, yeah, they faked the moon landing, but why? And that isn't far enough. That's a guardrail. Because at that point, you really haven't necessarily crossed that line into, well, if that was a staged event, what about when they sent the monkey in space? What about Sputnik? And if that's not real, if the moon landing's not real, well then, what of the science that got us there? Is that still valid? And then what about the probes? Again, in order to preserve the main view, they need guardrails to bounce the free thinker back into the main. And it works. So the moon landing hoax debunkers, I'm like 99% now sure they're probably working for the government. And I think so, having watched Mirage Men. Mirage Men is a documentary that explains perfectly how the Air Force employed basically liars to disinform conspiracy theorists and to create a UFO conspiracy culture that they could manage. And they could use this group in a number of different ways, mainly to conceal state secrets and to discredit people who ask too many questions. Like, this is admitted. And the guys who are doing it, the people who are part of these operations, these sanctioned COINTEL operations, they remind me of so many of the people that I've met just on YouTube in the last couple of years. Like, one of their main instruments here, I think, was building communities to create cults that they could isolate and segregate. And one of the ways that they cement these cults is they build conferences, communities around these conferences where you go and you meet and greet, you further solidify your network, and then, of course, now you have a bulwark against criticism. So you become somewhat resistant to criticism and more likely to go with what you believe instead of um, what challenges people may offer you. Like, people may say, well, maybe this is an explanation for it. Well, if you're in a group, you're more likely to stick to your beliefs. Look at the Mandela affected. Now, the Mandela affected crowd remind me of the UFO cults, where, and this is what's funny about it, the guy who set it up said, so we do these conferences, and I'm telling these people I saw a UFO and I was abducted, and I get inundated with people telling me they experienced the same thing. So this guy's a paid bullshitter, paid by the government to lie about having been abducted by aliens, among other things. And he has a UFO conference, and people flock in to say they experienced the same thing. And there's this huge sense of community. Everybody believes each other. Nobody questions anybody. And they were just remarking on the gullibility of these people. And I'm like, well, it's the gullibility of the group mind. When you give up your individual perceptions and you just become an extension of the group, you no longer critically examine what anybody in the group is saying. You overlook their discretions. You don't question their miracles because their belief reinforces yours. And the more of you, well, the more you don't have to contend with the non-believers. You can just ignore them. It's a numbers game. But this guy was laughing about how he was making stuff up, and then these other people were obviously making stuff up. So then the question becomes why? Why would somebody make it up? Oh, I saw a UFO, or I saw Bigfoot, or I smelled Bigfoot, as some of them say. Status. It's all about status. If you go into a church and you said, hey, I had the stigmata, my palms bled on Easter, you might get some status in a Catholic church because you've had that effect, you've had that miracle. If you speak in tongues, you roll on the floor, you levitate, there's so many things you can do that will give you status in a community of believers. So if you had an authentic sighting, or maybe you say you're an indigo child, you just need to have something that says, I'm special. It's a club for special people. That's what cults usually are, or these cults cater to that. So I saw Bigfoot, I'm special. I saw a UFO, I'm special. I was abducted. I was touched by a UFO. Oh yeah, well, I was touched by God. Like, everyone has their different connection to the other side, and that's what bonds them. So every Mandela affected person is saying, yeah, I too am from that universe where Ed McMahon was handing out big checks. Me too. Well, but what about the naysayers? Oh, well, they're just a bunch of non-playing characters, zombies. We're just trying to shake their faith. And that's kind of funny. They say that those of us who don't believe in the Mandela effect are just here in a spiritual tug of war to pull them back into the matrix where everything's fake and they're in the real world. Well, this is exactly what the Westboro Baptist Church, Southern Baptist, Calvinist types say. Like, oh yeah, the people who are doubting us were put there by God just to get us to question our faith, and we're here to witness to them that they're damned. So basically, these cult members end up hate watching the non-believers. And that's what they do for fun. Like, that's their primary focus, is the non-believers, and how if only they would conform, we could have unity and we could all believe the same thing. That's why they want God to wipe out the non-believers, so they have uniformity. That's why the climate change people want so badly for America to get flooded so they can have uniformity. And this is, of course, why they have flooded the free thinkers off of these major platforms, because they want uniformity. It's kind of interesting what this Metascript kind of reveals the more I look at it. Like, I really do think that 2019 was the year that the deep faked reality was exposed beyond any level that it's been exposed before. Because now we're at the point, and I could probably add this now. So, chemtrails. What was the other one? A couple of other things that, okay, chemtrails, MK Ultra, and clones. These are things that, ought to be left in 2019. Moving into 2020, I'm not really sure if I'm going to be all that interested in hearing people talking about, oh, we're getting sprayed today. Oh, the spray was really bad yesterday, but it's not so bad today. I prayed away my chemtrails today, so we had a great day. I remember the days when the sky used to be blue, and now we have all these, like, it's like they're always sitting around talking about chemtrails like there's any substance to it. And it's like normal people say, how's the weather? A chemtrail truther say, well, how are the chemtrails today? Travis Cloud, yeah. Chemtrail lung. When are they going to come down with that? I was watching Richie from Boston and his friend who wrote or did the documentary called Franken Skies, which came highly recommended to me by Dearth. And so these two guys are talking about chemtrails on this long 6-hour hangout. One of them is like hotboxing in his Jeep, vaping, and the other guy is chain smoking Camel cigarettes. And both of them are just talking about how, yeah, they're killing us with the chemtrails. And I'm like, do these guys think that the stuff that is being dropped 50,000 feet above their heads is going to do more damage than what they're directly inhaling in lieu of oxygen? When is the last time Richie from Boston had an unvaped inhalation? Probably never. And I still haven't been able to debunk the theory that his Jeep isn't actually parked in his garage and that they're using green screen to make it look like he's driving around the country. And also, one more thing. I did a little digging into 5G. They don't have the range that the 5G fear porners would have you believe. Sorry, Richie, it's not going to zap you. Doesn't have the reach. No. The 5Gs aren't going to be harmful until it's in your house and it's a box. Or so they say. Like, I'm starting to wonder if these people don't just fear microwaves. Like, they just fear anything. The same people who feared flip phones. Oh, I'll never get a flip phone. I'm not going to get brain tumors and sterilized and let Big Brother track me. Well, now these people are surrounded by monitors, smartphone, tablets, iPads, headphones, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi in their house, big screen TV. They're wired in 1,000%, and they're saying, we got to get off the grid. It's like, wait a minute. If you guys weren't phonies, you would have went off the grid right after 9/11. But nope. You're waiting for 5G like the rest of us. It's not like you're going to be on dial-up. I don't see them going to ham radio. I don't see them just dispensing with cell phones altogether. Yeah, I mean, it's just hypocrisy. Like the climate change hysterics. When are they going to just stop using plastic straws? Greta, we're looking at you. We saw what you had on the floor of that Tesla. The electric car full of single-use plastic trash from junk food. Junk food? Is that green? Is that sustainable? I thought she lived off of, like carrots and squash and onions and stuff. I didn't know she was actually driving around with like McDonald's and Burger King and KFC, eating a Popeye sandwich and all this while cruising around in a Tesla Roadster. For you, like, what do you mean you should be in school? You're loving it. She's literally eating a Big Mac in a Tesla Roadster, going around the world like a celebrity. And if you didn't know, she's the star of a TV show. It's a Hulu show called Greta that's going to be released. So this whole thing's been a movie anyway. But she's just as hypocritical as Richie from Boston, vaping in his Jeep, spreading fear and misinformation. And look, you're not a truther if you're still pushing false flag theory. There are no false flags. I mean, the idea of a false flag, yeah, theoretically, Maybe, but no, the explanation for these commonly observed events, these mass media presentations, whether it be a 9/11 or a school shooting or whatever, these aren't false flags. There are no MK Ultra shootings. These are all hoaxes. So 2020 is the year of the auto hoaxer. Anyone not up to speed with this can just be dismissed as behind the times. Like there's just something archaic about these throwbacks to the John Birch Society. These people saying, "Well, it's the Rockefellers and the Rockefellers, Zionists, not the bad Jews, but not the Jews. It's the bad Jews. The Jews are fine, but the bad Jews, the ones who pretend to be Jews, are the real bad Jews. They're the Zionists, and they're the Rockefeller banker reptilian uh, overlords that we need to deal with." And like they're never clear on who is what, but those stories are old, and it throws back to a time. It goes back to when I think maybe the conspiracy theories were written with a more Christian perspective. I mean, there were conspiracy theories against the Vatican that blamed Rome for everything. Well, now the same people who used to blame Rome for everything have become against the caliphate, where now the big devil is the Muslims. And you don't hear about this a lot because it's not all that popular in conspiracy circles. But the right wing conservatives believe that the Antichrist is going to be called the 12th Imam. And he's basically like Osama bin Laden on steroids, where he's going to come out and he's going to fulfill the role of the biblical Antichrist, and simultaneously, he will be the Muslim savior. And they will chop off the heads of the non believers and basically replace the Pope, and it'll be a one world caliphate under Islam. And then you have the whites, supremacist types who believe that it's already happened, but the Jews already conquered us. Then you have the black nationalists who are also against the Jews, but they're more pointed at, well, even though the Jews are bad, it's the white, blue eyed devils and their 6,000 year reign that we have to bring to an end. Everybody's got their bad guy, their supreme bad guy. In the political religions, it manifests in ways where they mythologize. And look, this is how I know QAnon. Okay, 2020, post QAnon. And look, 2020, I'm sorry, but provide evidence, because I'm starting to think that we have to be post Pizzagate, and here's why. This documentary, Mirageman, talks about how they put agents out there to promulgate silly stories, to mythologize things, to turn things into fantasy. So isn't it interesting that two of the major religious denominations of the day, Republican and Democrat, each have these beliefs about the other guy's leader that is pretty much like it is their devil. So, for example, if you're on the right and you're voting for Trump and you believe in QAnon, you literally think that Hillary Clinton traffics humans, drinks baby blood, participates in satanic cannibalistic rituals, rapes kids, and eats their brains. Like that lady, you've seen her on TV. She's falling apart. But the people on the right are so invested in this mythology that they actually just thrown away evidence, and they're just like, yeah, she's a baby eating cannibalistic witch serial killer in office. And it's like, when? When do they have time for this? Where's your evidence? It sounds fake. And if I say this stuff, I sound fake. It's like, oh, I don't have a legitimate criticism of her uh, policy, of her platforms. No, I'm just going to call her a baby eater. It's low brow, is what I'm saying. And then on the same token, you look on the left, they look at Trump and they say, well, Trump is Hitler. Trump is a sexist. Trump is Hitler. Trump is going to bring about nuclear war. They basically demonize to the point of irrationality. I mean, it's all ad hominem. But again, these are meant to appeal to the mass mind. And auto hoaxing would rule out anything without evidence. So if you look at Sandy Hook and you say, nobody died and or cried because there's no tears and no blood. On the contrary, there's just a bunch of laughter and everybody got paid. The police had a barbecue. They had a great time. So you look at this and you say, well, there's no evidence for a shooting. It's a hoax. Well, at this point, there's no evidence that the deep state are into baby eating. So I look at 2020 as basically the year that we stop taking their rabbit trails seriously. And more importantly, that we continue to call out by name and point out specifically what our issue is with what they're saying, the misinformers, whether they know it or not. So if somebody says, yeah, this shooting might be real, we have to wait and see, well, then they're way behind the curve, one. And if they blame it on a second shooter, MK Ultra, or they call it a false flag, like the guy High Impact Flicks. He's one in particular. Somebody got a video from the Mandalay that we weren't supposed to have. Someone had a video where you could see that the shooter wasn't there and there was no muzzle flash. So it contradicts the news. So instead of someone with a big channel like High Impact Flicks, hundreds of thousands of subs, and great t-shirts, he's got a great channel, but instead of saying, hey, look, folks, it's all fake, we can prove it now, for once. This proves that nobody died in Vegas, and this means, wow, the whole city's involved. The police are involved. President Trump's involved. The owners of these hotels are involved. This is huge. Like, instead of this thing being the bombshell that blows up the mainstream media hoax worldview, what does High Impact Flicks do? He says, well, no, there isn't a shooter there on top of that pyramid on the 32nd floor, which is very Masony. He says, no, he must have been on a helicopter a few miles away. So now we're supposed to believe that a helicopter shot those people. Well, one, nobody was shot. And two, there's no evidence that anyone shot. But two, he is deliberately ignoring the smoking gun, which is that there wasn't anybody on that building shooting anything. So why would High Impact Flicks with so many subs not reveal the truth when he has the chance? Because his job is to guardrail people back into the mainstream. Well, then now they have to say, okay, if you're a follower of High Impact Flicks, well, now you're not going to buy the narrative it was Stephen Paddock. So now you're going to have to say, well, it couldn't be Islam because there's no Allah Akbar as a helicopter, therefore it was deep state. This was a deep state gun grab drill where Democrats shot Republicans at a country music concert to punish them for the Second Amendment and to advance the agenda. It's all about your guns. And you know what this loser said? He said, it doesn't matter if it's real or fake. What matters is the agenda, and they want your guns. Nope, I had to stop right there. I'm like, that's the last time I'm ever taking this bozo seriously. High Impact Flicks saying it doesn't matter if it was real or fake. That's the only thing that matters. And so far, not one fake news story has been exposed because people like him bury them, which is their job. Their job is to bury anything before it can be exposed. Definitely, we saw, I think in this last year, Alex Jones, we definitely saw how they wanted to bring down the auto hoaxer by suing them. They sued Alex Jones and they sued Fetzer. Well, now that I know how this guard railing thing works, it seems to me that these are just fall guys. Alex Jones never exposed the Psy War. He exposed a few events, and badly. Badly. He turned these glitches in the Matrix, these potential, like, massively outrageous, these things are so explosive. Like, you could cause mass outrage if you expose one of these things. He could have done that. And he turned these into commercials for his cheap erection pills. Like, he pretty much just shat all over the truth for the last 20 years. Bill Hicks has been, a cancer. But that's because that's his job. And look what he's done. And yet somehow, some people still call him Alex Jones. We know Bill Hicks. And we know this was his objective. Bill Hicks replaced Bill Cooper, who probably didn't die. And most of it, again, is selling stories. See, I listened to Alex Jones when Sandy Hook came out, and I went to bed that night thinking, okay, well, obviously, this kid was undergoing some type of mind control that involved video games and pharmaceuticals, and he was probably just dragged into the room, and then they had the SWAT team or Black Ops murder the kids and pin it on him so they can start saying we need to disarm mental patients. That was my assessment in 2012. And thanks to Alex Jones, it made perfect sense. I was like, well, yeah, it's got to be an MK Ultra wind-up toy because it's totally fake. Why are these people laughing? So Alex is really good at what he does, or Jones, Bill Jones, Alex Hicks. His job is to muddy the waters so you never call out the entire thing as a hoax before they have a chance to move on to the next shooting and the next shooting. Meanwhile, never connecting them as all being a part of the same operation. And that's what none of them expose. None of these gatekeepers will expose how, if one of these is fake, it debunks the idea that we have partisan media who are just differing on interpretations of reality. If one of these is fake, it actually exposes that not only do we not have bipartisan media, but we don't have a free press. And propaganda is the rule, not the exception. So these people are basically guardians. The guardrails are guardians of the MSM paradigm. Alex Jones is a guardrail. High Impact Flicks is a guardrail. QAnon is a guardrail. So what I wanted to do was I want to make 2020 the year that we go over the guardrails. And anyone who cannot go over, for whatever reason, is pretty much a believer in the MSM church. And this is what surprised me about the flat earth community when they started conferencing. I'm like, why are they kissing media ass? Why are they acting like they're going to be accepted by the media? They're not. It's like they don't understand how it all works. Because they spend all the time criticizing NASA. But NASA didn't trick you with the moon landing or any of the probes. It was the MSM that presented their stories. So they act like these things are separate. Like we're criticizing NASA, but we like the news media, or we want the news media to accept us. It's like, no, this is all part of the same organization. Your attitude towards the media, if you are indeed challenging this official orthodoxy, should be, well, you guys are obviously just as bogus, just as phony, just as fake as NASA. But they never let that point of view get out, which is intentional. Obviously, they do not want that point of view getting out. They don't want the masses or the people in the world who are observing this to get the idea that the media is anything other than a fly on the wall, sometimes a little partisan, but they tell you when they are. It's like, nope, not at all. It is the church. It's there to make sure that everyone has the proper dosage of Tide Pod every day. Anyway, so just to recap here. So new standards for 2020. We already established that it's not enough to see through the space program if you can't see through the news on the ground. So 2018, we went post green screen. 2019, we really exposed this deep faked reality, the technology, how it's done, and how they're trying to hide it. We revealed the metascript that ties the celestial realm and the sun, the moon, the stars, and astrotheology to not only the sun cults here on earth and the Abrahamic faiths, the New Age, but also to the pop culture and the news media, where they are telling stories, they are telling a meta story, a meta script to the masses who don't know they're in church just by believing the MSM. So this was the year we exposed the meta script as real. We've exposed guardrails in the form of chemtrails, MK Ultra clones, and many other conspiracy theories that are used to hide psyops. Guardrails, guardrailers, a number of them this year, like Max Egan, High Impact Flicks, utterly exposed as agents and servants of the beast. So 2020 needs to be the year of the auto hoaxer. So this is the year that we dispense with any of the conspiracy theories that there's no evidence to support until somebody can supply the evidence. And if this is one of the things too, If someone says you're bad for not believing it, then my response is, well, then go get me some evidence. Because 2020, there has to be an elevation in our discourse. And I think I want to bring Hitchens' razor into the equation. So Occam's razor, the simplest answer, the one with the least number of leaps of logic or the least number of extraordinary conditions to be true, is probably true. The simple explanation. And Hitchens went a little further and he said anything that is posited without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. So I don't need to prove to you the Mandela effect is fake unless I want to do you a favor. I don't need to prove to you that Bigfoot is fake. I don't need to prove, I mean, this is the thing. The burden of proof hasn't been provided, so we can ignore it. And we've said this before, there's no point in debating true believers. I did debate a few times this year, Red's Rhetoric, Fight the Flat Earth, and maybe another one, but I only did so just to point out that ultimately everything they assert rests on their faith that the authority they cite is in fact an authority and not a scam artist, not a charlatan, and not lying to them. That's all they really have. Do you trust the MSM? Do you trust NASA? And at this point, I don't think you can. People were trying to give the benefit of the doubt. Anybody saying that there's a false flag theory to explain the news is actually giving the mainstream media the benefit of the doubt, saying, well, they just got it wrong because the truth is so buried and so hidden that most of them are dupes. It's like, no, you don't give them the benefit of the doubt. They're not reporting. They don't show up to report on something that wasn't pre-scripted, that isn't curated in advance. I mean, except on the very local level. But I'm sure many of you have heard, even on the mundane news, you can find examples where all across the country, every morning news team will make the same joke or say the same statement in the same way. Like they'll say something about Easter or say something about going back to school. But you can see that the scripts are uniform. So it's just like when you go to church, you hear everybody repeating the Lord's Prayer at the same time. And if you got 500 people repeating it, it sounds like one disembodied voice, like the voice of God. It's kind of creepy. That's how it sounded in my churches. But if you listen to these montages with the mainstream media all saying the same thing in the same tone, it sounds like a mass. And so we say mass media. These words I think are significant. And I've been looking into this idea of, just how often the truth is, hidden in plain sight, but also it's hidden in the language, like phonetically. Mass media and the concept of the church being a medium and these masses that they have reaching the mass mind. It's like it's pretty much like they barely change anything other than the window dressing. And we've made this correlation before that the cube, the TV is the black box, that has replaced the Bible as the main worldview shaper. And what we did see also during 2019 was a great deal of damage control. Look how much they've screwed up these platforms. Look at the roadblocks they put in front of content creators. And it's because they can't compete. They don't have the numbers. They have to manufacture the illusion of consent. So, I'm hoping this year too, we see YouTube really fall. Because the more people who leave that, the better. I think I want to get this network that we have back to the point where it was last March. Like if we could get 1,000 live listeners, I think we could really sway things. We've seen the damage control that happened last year after every story. It seems like the way that this thing is fought, this Psy-War, it's not like they take the dissident and throw you in a gulag. What they do is they offer counter spins and counter stories. I mean, it's the strangest thing, but it's almost real time. Like, I don't know if you saw this, but on Instagram it is trending that the Currys are being deep faked. So if you do a web search on Stephen or Aisha Curry about deep fakes, yeah, somebody put their faces on other bodies. But before this story broke, if you searched it, you would have found our videos talking about Miley Cyrus deep faking it as Aisha. So this level of damage control, though, I think we can ramp it up if we can get the numbers. So what I was thinking about doing was making it a point to start doing these weekly incursions into AM to even bring temporarily, on a single night a week, a few thousand listeners who aren't on YouTube will have a major effect because many of them will go to the website and they will join us on these platforms. So instead of letting YouTube curate our audience for us, which is what they try to do, instead of having them decide who gets to listen to what content creator, we bring our own. And it's not even YouTube, it's really all the platforms. The only reason why YouTube is relevant is because it's always been like an interface where we're competing for the same mass audience that the mass media is competing for. But I see that they betrayed a lot of like weakness, especially when they decided, well, you can't stream because this mosque got shot. Oh, now you can't stream on Twitch because this synagogue got shot. I mean, and it's the same people behind it. Did you guys see? His name is Jerry Myers, this Pittsburgh rabbi. It's Gene Rosen from Sandy Hook. Gene Rosen from Sandy Hook in another gun grab drill, demonizing some kid with a bowl cut or some white kid. Like, same agenda, same actors, and it's also, I think, something for 2020. It's important that we continue this keeping up with the crisis actors and continue to ridicule and make fun of them and have fun doing it. Like when I look at some of these so-called truthers who are still spreading misinformation, I look at them, sitting in their jeeps in their gravelly voices talking about how the weather's never been this bad, nothing's ever been this bad, it's worse than it ever was, the world's coming to an end, buy my MREs. I hear these doomsayers, and like, what are they selling beyond fear? And just guardrailing the mainstream narratives. When you realize things are fake, the fear goes away. Everything you've been told to duck and cover for nukes, school shooters, or punishing gods, these things are all fake. And so we reveal these things to be fake. Shouldn't our response, to the good news, shouldn't it be like, well, okay, this is great? But instead, you have people who are making a living off of darkening people's perceptions. And that's exactly what the MSM wants. So I don't really want to tolerate any of these doom boofers. And one of the best ways to combat them, of course, is memes and mockery. If you can mock Greta for pushing fear about the weather, why can't we criticize the people who are pushing other irrational fears that are tantamount to the same thing? Like the 5G chemtrail cocktail. Is that really something to fear? Or is it something to replace the fear of God or fear of chemtrails that didn't catch you? Is it another guardrail? And I'm starting to say, yeah, it's a guardrail. Anyway, we have about 5 more days until then. I'm hoping they bring down the space station before New Year's, because I think that would be far more consistent. But I think they technically have until January 27th. You know when it might come down? 113. Why not? Why not January 13th? We've been seeing a lot of the 311, 11-3 symbolism, even in conjunction with this. Even the movie Dark Phoenix with the burning space shuttle had 113 minutes on its runtime. Like the movie How It Ends, about Seattle getting hit with an EMP. So there's quite a lot here. For me, for the space station to suggest that something's going to happen, but I think that being proactive in reading the metascript is going to pay off big in terms of credibility. Now you just wait until something happens, and a whole lot of people who heard it here first will realize, okay, I have plenty of reason to doubt it. Once you plant the notion there, it becomes easier to auto hoax it. This is one reason why I don't think they're going to do an alien invasion. Every single person in the conspiracy subcultures know that they're going to fake alien invasions. I think this is widespread knowledge, right? So why would they do it? Now, what I'm describing, space war, could do it. China and Russia and Iran deciding to take over space, pushing our way out of it. And something else, too. It's not just that America is the problem, it's really just that one faction of America. So you have to remember, too, that when we're looking at the UN, looking at us saying, you guys need to clean up your act, you're putting too much junk up there, we don't want to Americanize space, these people are only looking at the American right. So internally, David Hogg's side of the fence, they're going to be on the side of China and Russia and Iran. They're going to be on the side of the world state, saving the world against America and saving space and making sure that we all migrate to space as commies. They're on that side of the fence. So not only is America a pariah, but it's like even within, the people who are resisting are only half the country here. And they're not even resisting well. Because even though they may dispute a lot of the stuff, they believe enough to be a victim to it. So space wars is still a reality for them. And when the China, Russia, when the space wars get kicked back in and they start shooting down our satellites, when that DirecTV satellite crashes on the White House, they're all going to believe it. They're going to believe it when they see the CGI in the sky. I was looking at that Starlink, the CGI train that Musk put up there. It's just so fake as can be. But that's all it takes. They've been dropping meteors for the last year. They've been toying with space wars. It's in the meta script. And like I said, space war is going to also be cyberspace war. Another reason to get in print, obviously, which we will be doing. Then, of course, North Korea talked about nuking us this Christmas. They said an asteroid the size of the World Trade Center is going to hit us this Christmas or the day after. That's today. So a 9/11 size rock. I mean, the rock's the size of the World Trade Center. Now they said it's 919 feet across, which is kind of 9/11y, 919 or something. But on the live stream I actually said it was 911 feet because it's so freaking arbitrary anyway. They might as well. But why would that be hitting us today? Well, because we're all home. We're all paying attention. People on the right who fear North Korea, like, hey, look, this rock the size of the World Trade Tower might actually hit us. But that coinciding with the North Korean threat, I think to me it just shows you more and more. And then, of course, you had this thing with Boeing, where Boeing had some capsule they sent to the space station. It totally flopped, endangered some astronauts. And of course, they're the main suppliers of all forms of engineering support. And then remember this too, talking about the 11.3 thing. Last year on 3/11, the Boeing Max crashed in Ethiopia with 150 some people on board. So there you have your 3/11/11.3 tying Boeing into this. And of course, your 33 ties, it really synchronizes all this stuff together. So I'm hoping they pull the plug on it because I feel like we can do a really effective mind map and we can really show how integrated all this stuff actually is. And exposing the meta script is what we should be doing. We have people looking at predictive programming and noticing it, which is great, but until we have the context to put it in, it's not going to make total sense. Just like it doesn't make sense when you say this person may have faked their death and now they're presenting themselves as this person. It doesn't make sense logically. Unless you're willing to, or unless you're able to comprehend how it fits into this concept of how the news media actually operates as the church of state and how they use theater as a tool of governance. But this is the deep faked reality stuff that we brought up this year. So we're moving into 2020, so I'm probably going to do another 10 predictions. So if anybody has any suggestions, I'll be writing that 10 predictions for 2020, and I'll be replaying the predictions for 2019. But I'm hoping they do something big very soon. I was disappointed about November 3rd. I had my hopes up for January 3rd. And look, January 3rd would still be within. No, January 13th. January 13th would still be within that window. It'd still be within the 33 years of the space shuttle immolation. So we can all doom hope that that's the case.
Yeah. The globe is in my home. The globe is in my home. Globe, globe. They're telling me the globe is my home. I'm too infinite, 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 infinite. Globe is in my home. The globe is in my home. Telling me the globe is my home. The globe is in my home. The globe is in my home. I'm too infinite. I'm too infinite. I'm too infinite. And I'm killing it. I'm killing it. I'm drilling it. And I said it's fake as shit. Yeah, I was in the basement. Now I'm in the spaceship, cause it's fake shit. Right on my camera, and I'm guiding the challenger. I'm smashing the actress, cause that's all that NASA is. Space isn't real, the stars are a spirit, and I'm trying to do it real. I'm counting it. Space is so fake. Nobody can relate. So infinite, yeah. I'm so infinite, 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 infinite. Oh, 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 I'm so different, different, different.